Hello, everyone. So this is the second to last unit in the course, so only one more to go, so we're almost there. This week we're going to be discussing power in organizations. When you hear the word power, there's a lot of connotations to power, a lot of them negative, but power is an essential part of any organization, and the use of power and the wielding of power is an essential part of not just criminal justice organizations, but any organization. Power is used to gain compliance and control over what is happening in an organization. So, and then if you have criminal justice organizations, you have the additional element of using power to gain compliance from the clients of that particular organization. And more than likely, those clients don't necessarily want to be part of the organization. They may be unruly. They may be uncooperative. They may be combative. Okay, so you have the two kinds of power. You have the power, exerted within the organization over the people that work there, and then you also have the power exerted by the organization over the quote-unquote clients of the organization. So if you look at those definitions of power that are included in the book, you're going to see several themes that emerge from those definitions. And the book does a really nice job of identifying those themes. So the first is that power is a social phenomenon that can't really be studied without understanding the dynamics between those that possess the power and those who experience the power or have the power used against them. So it's important to understand both, of those organizational members to understand the power and the use of the power. The second thing that emerges is that power is a capacity or ability. These be energized, mobilized, or exercised. I'm sorry, mine kind of a little blank there for a minute. Merely having power is not really enough to elicit compliance. You have to use power. You have to wield the power. You have to mobilize the power. The third theme addresses what the capacity or ability to wield power allows the power holder to do. Okay, so what are they able to do because they have this power? And then the final theme is that power relations are oftentimes reciprocal. Okay, so the recipients of the power, people that it's used against, also hold some power over those that are thought to possess the power. So if you get into like the academic research or you do some organizational reading, you'll see that the word power is oftentimes used interchangeably with words authority and leadership. Much like before we talked about socialization and culture are oftentimes used interchangeably. And even though they're all related, it's not certainly not the same concepts. Okay, so authority is the right of someone to make demands of somebody else. And then having authority doesn't necessarily mean that someone has power. And power does not necessarily mean that somebody has authority. People have power over other people, but don't have the authority, or they don't have the right, to make demands over someone. So leaders then use authority and power to further people toward organizational goals. But power does not equal leadership. Okay, some people have power but are terrible leaders, or not even leaders at all. Leadership requires that the leader and the follower have agree on some level about goal compatibility. So the goal of the leaders and the goal of the followers are compatible, at least on some level. Simply having power over someone does not mean that there's any goal compatibility. Simply having power over someone doesn't mean that what you're trying to accomplish is what they're trying to accomplish as well. True leadership, there'll be compatibility in those goals. So that's kind of briefly, kind of in a nutshell, what power is. So where does it come from, right? Where do people get this power that they use within the organization? So what's the base of someone's power? Well, there's a lot of different ways or sources from which people can derive power. But some of the more common ones are coercive power, which is the power to punish, Reward power, which is the power to grant some kind of reward. Legitimate power, which means that the person has the right to make demands because of the position. Referent power, which means that the recipient of the power admires, respects, or seeks to associate with those in power. Expert power, meaning that someone has a lot of knowledge or extensive knowledge about a subject. Information power, controlling information. Certainly someone who controls information, controls knowledge within an organization will be able to exert power. Resource power, those that control the resources have power over those that do not. And then charismatic power. And this is more just the power to inspire, power to motivate, right? So there's a variety of different bases of power that people could, derive this power from. And once you have this base of power, then you can start to influence behavior. And people influence behavior through the use of techniques. And it really depends on the situation, which sort of technique is most appropriate to be used. Techniques of influence, we'll call them. If you look at the table in the book, I believe it's 11.1. It lists all those techniques of influence and a little description about each of them. And those are important. Make sure you look at those and think about when each of those types of things could be used. But if we're talking about just criminal justice now, one of the most important ones for criminal justice is going to be exchange. All right, so we've talked about what power is, where power comes from, and all of this has kind of been under this assumption that people that wield power do it effectively, right? There's been this, we haven't really talked about, well, what happens if somebody's ineffective at the wielding of power, right? All the stuff we've talked about so far pretty much assumes that people that wield power do it in an effective manner. So obviously that's not the case, right? Just because people have power doesn't mean that it's used effectively. And it's especially the case in criminal justice. So if we think about this exchange relationship or these reciprocal relationships that we were just talking about. So subordinates in criminal justice possess quite a bit of power over their supervisors. You don't typically think about it that way. You think about, especially when you talk about traditional model of supervision or, the very strict paramilitary, bureaucratic, type organizations with the hierarchy and chain of command and all that stuff. A lot of times you often think about just power coming down the chain, right? Just on down. Every layer has power over the ones under them. But really, if you think about what criminal justice people do, what criminal justice professionals do, subordinates have a lot of power over their supervisors. So they have ways that they can make things very, very easy for their supervisors, or they can make things very, very difficult. Okay, so one of the things that works in their favor is that the normal day-to-day activities of criminal justice workers are not easily observed. Now, that's changing to a degree, right? There's a lot more video, there's a lot more things being recorded, but still a lot of the stuff that, the everyday line officers, be they probation, be they police, whatever, are not easily observed, right? Especially by supervisors. If you're a police sergeant, you cannot continuously monitor the behavior of those that are being supervised because they're spread out, over however much ground within a city or over a county. I mean, it's very, very difficult to constantly monitor the behavior of those being supervised. And this is where a personal power base becomes more important than an official power base. Okay, so the official power base, would be, those things like being at such and such place in the hierarchy, right? You have an official position power base, but you also have a personal power base. Okay, so position power requires surveillance to enforce compliance and exert the power. Position power They have to know what's going on and be able to see what's happening in order to exert the power over their subordinates. And again, not very often, not possible within criminal justice. So more personal bases of power are going to be more important. Bases of power such as expert or referent power are probably going to be more important for criminal justice supervisors than other types of bases of power. So that's kind of a real quick discussion of power. Make sure you read all the stuff in the book and complete your discussion board this week. And then I'll see you next week to finish this up with the final topic for the semester.